I love RPG Maker horror games. I said that in my last video, but I'm saying it again because that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. There is just something so unique about the various gameplay styles that come from these games. It's not even the RPG Maker engines themselves that make the game so amazing, it's what people do to bypass the limitations set by these engines that sparks the creativity within these developers. There are plenty of games that I intend to talk about from this genre, but I wanted to start with something smaller. So in turn, I chose a really short game that goes by the name Milliefiori. Now Milliefiori was created by a developer named Charon. A majority of Charon's games are visual novelesque tales of psychopaths, crazy dares, and various other dark and sometimes really depressing topics. Like most visual novels, Charon games tend to offer multiple endings, but if there was one thing that made their games stand out, it would be the fact that the endings are almost always very, very grim. Most, if not all, of Charon's games label what is normally considered a good ending as the true ending, and I'll get more into that later, since it is a relatively important recurring theme in Charon's works. So now that I've gotten the main premise of Charon's games out of the way, I think it's about time that I shifted my focus to Milliefiori. The first thing I want to bring up is that this was Charon's second game. As of the recording of this video, they've made at least 30 more since then. In other words, this was one of Charon's earliest works. It was released in 2013 and created using the RPG Maker 2000 engine. For anyone that is unaware, this has generally been the engine used to create some of the most popular RPG Maker horror games. Even so, Milliefiori is not necessarily a traditional RPG Maker game. As I mentioned before, Charon almost exclusively develops visual novels, and in turn, it means that there isn't much gameplay to Milliefiori. Instead, the player is to follow the story through text-based dialogue, with the final conclusion and ending being the only actual element that is manipulated by the player. To sum it up, a super short visual novel. Now before I begin running through the story of this game, I wanted to take note of the fact that the name Milliefiori is not actually the official name given by Charon themselves. Milliefiori was fan translated, and those same translators were the ones that gave Milliefiori its name. But as this person points out, the English name for it is probably Ichigaulait. If this is true, which it probably is, this actually makes the title make way more sense, since Aulait means with milk, and each of the characters gift you a milk-based drink when you first meet them. I just wanted to make a note of that, since the title Milliefiori, or even in English Mix-or, doesn't necessarily make sense within the context of the game. Even still, I am more accustomed to saying Milliefiori, so I'm going to continue referring to it as such. But with all of that out of the way, let's actually play, or really walk through, Milliefiori. So the game opens up with a content warning. Likewise, I'm also going to open up with an inappropriate content warning.
Toxic.
Though I've already shown a bit of bad stuff, just keep in mind that there's going to be crude language, violence, and all the other bad stuff. Anyways, the game starts with us waking up in the rain. It sounds like the main character has been hit by a car. We then jump forward to when we are taken to the hospital. But to our dismay, we seem to have amnesia. So after making that revelation, we decide to look around. There's a mystery girl sitting next to us, and a teacup sitting on the table. Now, here we get to make one of the few choices that actually do matter in this game. We get to choose which girl is the girl sitting next to us. We have 3 choices here: strawberry milk, honey milk, and a Cafeaulait, like in the title. Now, I'm just going to be choosing them in order. So, we're going to start with the timeline for strawberry milk. And when we do, hey, it's a girl wearing pink and red because strawberries are in strawberry milk. What a coincidence. Anyways, this girl's name is Nagisa Ichigaulait. Her last name is a fusion of Ichigo, the Japanese word for strawberry, and Aulait, which we now know means with milk. So basically, Nagisa strawberry milk. Now, Nagisa claims that she is our girlfriend, and our main character, who we now know is named Kentaro, seems to just accept that as fact. And despite there being dialogue choices that seem to lead to a different scenario, we are always forced to go down the same path. Which brings up possibly the biggest negative in Mixori, the fact that none of these choices actually do mean anything. It's a little confusing as to why they're even there, since no matter what you choose, you're always going to get the same response. There are a few exceptions where you get 1 or 2 extra dialogue boxes for certain choices, but ultimately, you will always end up on the same path. It's not that there's anything bad with having a linear story, it just makes you wonder why the dialogue options are there in the first place. Anyways, Nagisa continues to talk about how much she loves us and cares about us, and then she leaves for the day. We now get to move Kantaro around his hospital room, which is very quaint, and we can also take this opportunity to save. But really, this little segment exists to hint to the player that something probably isn't right. Someone approaches you, or you find something weird within the room. For Nagisa's route, you are confronted by a mysterious stalker, a young girl. Her name is Sane Cafeaulait. Her last name is likely a reference to chocolate milk. But also, if you've watched Clannad, you would now figure out that Nagisa and Sane's names are references to characters from said series. A nice touch. So, Sane also realizes we have amnesia and just leaves. Moving on to the next day. The second day always features you and your selected girl going out and having some fun. This is the day where you're supposed to kind of get to know the character better. Nagisa mentions that she is also aware of this stalker that you met last night, and also claims that they are the ones that tried to kill you. And that night, Sane the stalker returns. She introduces herself, but only before quickly running away. The third day is called Suspicion. This is again the same with all 3 characters. On Nagisa's, she decides to take you to your memory spot, which is supposedly where you had your first kiss with her. After getting a little intimate with her, she brings up the stalker again and starts ranting about her following you. That night, Sane does not come to meet you, so we simply continue to the final day. This day is menacingly called Ichigaulait. I don't know why, but I really liked the ending day names for each of the girls. It's kind of like giving a serial killer a nickname, but instead we're just saying the Ichigaulait. And you just know that everything's been culminating to this moment, even if you as the player probably just met the girl 20 minutes ago. So on this final day, Nagisa does not come to greet us. We go out looking for her, but instead what we find is oh my god! Sane's body. And lo and behold, who else is there but the Ichigaulait herself? Nagisa proudly tells us that she killed her, and the truth is finally revealed. The reason Sane kept coming up to our hospital room was because she was our actual girlfriend. And yes, Nagisa was actually the stalker. And now she is also a murderer, which makes her a yandere. So we now get a flashback to the point where Nagisa probably broke. It was the moment where Kantaro and Sane had their first kiss, which was at Nagisa's supposed memory spot. And as it turns out, she was merely peering through the window, watching them kiss. Nagisa seems to have had a breakdown at that moment, and her vacant eyes tell the same story. She starts saying some crazy stuff.
I'm so much more in love with your cheese. What is this? I'm the one going out with Kantaro. It's me.
So after that shenanigan, she probably went on to start her career as an official yandere. So, flashback moment over. Nagisa's pissed, she's telling you she's your girlfriend, and now you have to make a very critical choice. Nagisa starts breaking down crying and asks you if she should die. If you tell her that she should, you will get the bad ending and she just commits suicide. So, you tell her that she shouldn't die. And then you have possibly the best and most emotional scene in the game. Nagisa thanks you for being so kind, and then explains that that's why she was so obsessed with you. This was a pretty good scene. You're kind of picking Nagisa's brain, and she gives you answers for why she's so freaking crazy. Could it have been fleshed out more? Yeah, but it's still a very good end scene to the chapter. And though all seems relatively happy in the end, aside from Sane dying, things aren't. Nagisa asks you to hug her, and when you do, she kills you, as a yandere does. But right after that, she kills herself, so she can be with you eternally, even in death. Like I said, pretty dark. And the very last dialogue given says you hear sirens. This is exactly like the beginning of the game, where you woke up hearing sirens. Even if there was a really basic yandere trope within that, I really liked the way it was done. I liked the slow build up to the twists, and I especially like how even with how short this part is, you were able to get a pretty good idea of Nagisa's character. She was hyper, extremely romantic, to some extent, and seems to be very lonely. A very good start, I'd say. So, without further ado, let's move on to our second girl, who is found under the honey milk root. Here we have Rikana Milliefiori, and what do you know, she has blonde hair, like honey in honey milk. I really don't know the meaning of her last name though, so we're just going to have to assume that it means something related to honey milk. Rikana tells us that she is our younger sister, and being the good sister that she was, she came and saw us. She talks with us a bit, albeit in a condescending yet playful tone, and then she leaves. So in this route, there is no stalker. Instead, the first thing we take notice to is that we are probably very rich.
Ho ho!
So fast forwarding to day 2, our outing. You and Rikana go out, and she talks to you for a bit. She tells you that apparently your relationship with her was not very good before you got into the accident, but now it seems to be heading in a better direction. But that night, you find a piece of paper near the chair that she was sitting on, and it says,
Stupid, 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 stupid,
and so on. This note makes it seem like Rikana doesn't want to be there at all. Nevertheless, she shows up on the third day. First, she tells you that she's hungry. Then she asks you if you have a girlfriend, for some reason. But then she asks you if you'll give her money to go to a prestigious school.
This is big brain time.
She implies that she doesn't have very much money herself, which is apparently why she's so hungry all the time. And also says that giving her the money is what mom and dad would have wanted, implying that they were no longer with us. Either way, you give her the money. You can either give her your passbook that you found the previous day, or you can give her just enough money to go to school. Even though this seems like something that would change the ending, it actually doesn't. So, that night, you find a note from yourself that confirms your suspicions. Your parents have died, and they have left you with a very large inheritance. Unfortunately, you've probably given that entire inheritance to Rikana. And the next day, Rikana is nowhere to be found. You do some digging and find out that she was, unsurprisingly, not your sister. What?! That all ends up happening in the third day, and day 4, Milliefiori, ends up happening months later. You've tracked down Rikana and confront her, and she goes absolutely devil mode on you. She starts cussing you out and telling you all about how stupid you are. Yes, she realized you had a large inheritance and was just trying to con you out of your money. She wasn't your sister, just a con artist. The one thing she wasn't lying about was actually being poor. She's stuck with her father's debt and needs to pay it off. Rikana has been stuck with this debt for a very long time, and it isn't even hers. She makes it clear to us that all she wants to do is get back at the world for cursing her with this terrible life. Unlike the other two girls, a case can be made that Rikana is much more sane, and therefore a more relatable antagonist. She probably does have the most unique story out of the three as well. Rikana's critical choice comes in the form of her asking you whether or not you want to die. The bad ending for this one is kinda interesting. If you say you want to die, you get angry and end up pushing Rikana into the street, and she gets hit by a car.
Oh no!
After that, your sanity just seems to snap, and after running for a while, you see a car and presumably jump out in front of it. By this point, Kantaro has seemingly fallen in love with Rikana, or has a really familial bond with her now, and wants to be with her in death. Sort of like Nagisa. It's interesting, but that's all it is. In the true ending, she has a really we live in a society moment, and explains that she wanted someone else to feel her pain. Also, she's gotten so angry that she's ended up growing a second nose. I know it's just supposed to be wrinkles or something, but it looks amazing. And needless to say, that face really does say a lot about our society. After that, Kantaro seems to be in shock that he'll never get his money back, then he just gets really depressed within an instant. He realizes that he'll never have anyone like Rikana to take care of him anymore, and he just gets run over by a car. Well, you're definitely hearing sirens after that one. Rikana's route is definitely the tamest of the three. There's no murder, and the girl doesn't actually kill you, you kinda do it yourself. It's also got a more unique story. There's not necessarily a very big trope of someone pretending to be your sister and then taking all your money, so I would say it was pretty unique. Rikana also got to reappear in her own game. It was technically a fan game, but it was soon fully endorsed by Charon themselves. It is a prequel that gives more insight as to why Rikana was in the position that she was in when we first met her. I may check it out on here someday. So now we are on to the final girl. Let's see the girl in the Cafeaulait route. This is Ayano Cafeaulait, and she wears green because... coffee? Yeah, I really don't think Ayano's color was meant to tie in with Cafeaulait. This time around, Ayano claims that she is our junior, and you both happen to be team leaders on the soccer team. At first glance, she could be considered the most normal of the three, but even at this stage, there are some hints to her unwellness. And maybe the Kantaro's unwellness too, since some of these dialogue options are a bit perverted. But if you do happen to choose one of these unusual dialogue options, Ayano will go on like nothing happened. I mean, sure, she'll say one brief insult to you or tell you to stop being such a perv, but then she'll continue on and act like she's falling in love with you. So something's definitely off. That night, you have an interesting conversation with the save rabbit. It asks you if you like Ayano. If you say yes, it agrees with you and says she's the cutest, but if you say no, it says, I really don't know what this was supposed to hint at, even after finishing the game many times, so just make of that what you will. During the second day, you can be weird some more, but also go out with Ayano and talk with her a bit. Like the rest of the girls, she asks you about your memory, but then goes on to say how lucky you are for being able to have a do-over in life. Now it's implied that you probably did some bad stuff before you had that accident. Both of you then head to the school, and Kantaro notices that Ayano acts very devoted to him. I guess this isn't weird if he assumes that she's in love with him, but for us as the player, yeah. That night, you find some explicit photos that may or may not be of Ayano. Also, I just realized that all of this random stuff keeps appearing in your hospital room with no explanation, but considering the fact that there is already a bouncing magic save rabbit watching me sleep, I'm going to continue to feign ignorance. On the third day, Ayano starts getting a bit intimate with us, and then tells us about how much she hates perverted men. And I gotta say, Ayano's route definitely has the most magnificent dialogue choices. Anyways, she quickly leaves soon after this. That night, it's implied that Ayano glued your shoes to the floor, which is definitely weird. But with that very short day out of the way, we move on to day 4, Cafeaulait. Ayano says that she wants to go to your house to quote-unquote play, so you decide to go meet her over there. Kentaro gets intimate with her again, and then she wraps her arms around him. After acting all lovey-dovey for a bit, she finally switches to cuckoo mode. Ayano reveals that she was the one that was trying to kill us this time, but it doesn't end there. She takes out a knife as she prepares to finish the job.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
Kantaro asks Ayano what he did to her before his accident, so she explains. And as could have been gathered by the lewd pictures in your hospital room and the multiple perverted dialogue choices, Kantaro had sexually harassed and bullied Ayano. This drove her insane, and she came to the conclusion that killing you was the only way to end her suffering. But by this point, I think it's safe to say that she's killing you purely for revenge now. After her explanation, she says that she,
love, hate, despise.
So much that she wants to slaughter us. And then she starts laughing. Ayano is very obviously going to kill you. Now, your critical choice here is to defend yourself, or just accept it. You would think that the right choice would be to defend yourself, but it isn't. If you do try to defend yourself, you end up strangling Ayano and beating her to a pulp with a trophy. Brutal, and I guess people have very fragile psyches in this world. You think she's dead, and you leave, but that isn't the end. The game jumps to when Ayano is found, and amazingly, she survives. The twist is that she now can't remember anything. I gotta say, that is a pretty good twist. It is just unfortunate that it doesn't go any further than that. But who knows, maybe someone will miraculously come out of nowhere and make a fan game that kind of goes into that route. To be honest, that's the most interesting bad ending in this game. So in the true ending, you accept your fate and let Ayano kill you. You're then given some inner dialogue from Kentaro, who I guess fell in love with Ayano and no longer has the perverted tendencies that he had before his accident. Even though you can still get this ending while choosing the asshole and sexualized dialogue choices. But still, Kentaro is remorseful and a single tear runs down his cheek. I think you can guess what he hears after that. And so, the cycle continues. Ayano's route was definitely something else. It had a very forced twist, but it was still enjoyable to play. This was also the first route that I played when I first tried the game. I do think the dialogue could have gone in more places too, which only makes me wish for more in this game. But nevertheless, that was Milliefiori. It's a very fun little game to play, especially if you don't know what you're getting into. I think there was definitely quite a bit of work put into the story for this game. You can tell Charon was especially passionate for writing the dialogue. For example, I especially liked that if you played a second time around, you would end up noticing some dialogue that actually implied the motive of one of the girls, or the truth of a situation, and that was pretty cool. I also don't think it can really be classified as scary, but it definitely contains elements of horror. I also mentioned at the beginning of the video that I would dive more into the purpose of the true endings. Like I said earlier, Charon always uses true endings in place of good endings. I think the purpose of this really stems from why Charon makes games. This really is just speculation, but I'm still gonna make my case for it. Charon more frequently writes about realistic and depressing themes. Milliefiori wasn't necessarily realistic, but it definitely called attention to serious subjects in real life, such as poverty, mental health, sexual harassment, bullying, and likely some stuff that I didn't even notice. Charon wants the player to feel sad. I believe that, alongside calling attention to these serious subjects, is the primary purpose of their games. So when I take that into consideration, I would say that I really enjoyed Milliefiori. Even if you don't consider any of the factors that I just mentioned, it's still an interesting experience to go through. So, it's a little hard for me to now recommend playing Milliefiori, since I just explained the entire game's story, but I do recommend that you play some of Charon's other games. They have plenty of older RPG Maker games, and they also have plenty of newer visual novel games. 2 of them are on Steam. Unfortunately, the list isn't as long as it should be for English viewers, since most of these games have not been translated and probably won't unless a fan does it. If you would like my Charon picks, I would definitely recommend checking out Makoto Mobius, Yandere, Shihori Escape, The Dark Side of Red Riding Hood, Main of Rafflesia, and Vanilla Garden of Judgment. Main of Rafflesia in particular is my favorite of the bunch. Hint hint, it works exactly like Milliefiori. And with that, I am finished. Thank you so very much if you have watched to the end. I really do appreciate it. The only thing I ask is that you share this video if you liked it, and if you didn't, let me know. I will always do my best to try and implement constructive criticism. Also, for anyone interested in knowing what my next video is going to be, I can say for certain that it is a video on Yakuza 5. I've actually been working on that video longer than I have this one, so it will hopefully turn out pretty good. And so, we have reached the end. Thank you again for watching.